welcome to another Digital Photo Mentor live stream broadcast here on YouTube. This week, we're going to be talking about creating and editing abstract photos, as you can see here. I'm going to show you how I made this one in camera and also how I edit it to have these funky colors. As well, I'll be editing some subscriber submitted images. If you are new here and you want to submit your images, there is a link for you to do so. Rob will put it in the chat if you're watching live. And if you're watching the replay, it will be in the description area below the video. You can always get all the links right below in the description area. And that's the link to submit your images. So we've got some really cool images submitted. I want to run through a few and give some suggestions as to what you could do with these and give you a start. But I might not finish them. I'm just going to give you some ideas and then see where you run with it. So I'd love to have you share your images in the Facebook group, the Digital Photo Mentor Facebook group, so we can see what you create out of these same images if you submitted them. So if you could also please share our Facebook group link, Rob, in the chat and also in the description area below if you're watching later. So we've got lots of regulars here as usual. I see Holly and made it for the abstract one. I knew this was up your alley, Anne, and I do have one of your images. Vivian, I have yours as well. And Sheila's here, Marguerite, Kelly, Neo, Danelle. Is it Mickey or Mikey? I'm always saying Mickey, but I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that correctly. Hopefully I am. So lots of regulars. Lee as well. Awesome. All right. So without further ado, I am going to hop over to Lightroom. And as usual, I am going to be demonstrating, showing both Lightroom and Luminar. So depending on what I want to do to the image, for the most part, it's not really easy to abstract stuff in Lightroom. You need to go to either Photoshop or Luminar to do that. So I'm not sure what he's yelling at about from the basement. So here's the images we're going to be working with today. And we've got a really cool, looks like in-camera movement. Oops, I zoomed in a little too far from Danelle. So it looks like she's done some long exposure here. I believe if I turn that on, yes. So we can see that it was 0.6 of a second. So she's moved the camera during the exposure. I'll show you some more examples of that. And then Neil has submitted some similar ones. So in this case, he's done a zoom. So zooming during the exposure at a very similar exposure, you could see 0.7 of a second. So almost 3/4 of a second-ish, okay? And he's done this one at half second. So you kind of start to see the effect that's created when zooming, right? This is one Anne has submitted. So we'll see what we can do with that. And I'm going to change my background color back to medium gray. There we go. Let me just get this a little smaller. Try to make the images bigger. Okay, so I'm going to start in Lightroom, and I'm actually going to start with one of Vivian's. This is one that she submit for forest, but I want to actually make this into an abstract because I saw the potential with this reflection. So I want to do some really cool things with this. I'm going to start with Lightroom, and then we're going to take it over into Luminar to do some more abstraction. Now, the first thing that I'm going to do is to crop it because initially when I saw this image, the first thing that I thought of was that I want to crop out most of the top of the image and keep just the reflection. I'm going to try to get it as straight as possible here and keep just the reflection, maybe a tiny bit of this tree down here, just to hint at what actually is the real scene. So I'm going to do something like that. Okay. Then I'm going to flip it upside down so that it really messes with people's minds. Okay. So I'm using the keyboard shortcuts on here, Lightroom. That is Command and the square bracket keys. So if you want to share our Lightroom keyboard shortcuts cheat sheet link, please, Rob. Now we can start to play with the color and the style of the image, make it blurrier, and so on. Okay, I want to make sure that we've got some nice color in the water. So I'm going to start by looking at the camera profiles, right? I'm guessing that I'm probably not going to use one of the camera ones, but instead, let's take a look at some of these others. Okay, so modern has some great colors. I tend to like number 7. I'm not sure why. It adds darkness. Okay, we can also try some of these. The vintage ones, not so much on this, although that's not bad. We could also look at the artistic ones. So these are all built into Lightroom. Right? So when you first open Lightroom, you'll see all of these under the camera profiles. If you didn't see where I got that from, that's right up here. So in the basic panel, the little squares. Okay? I am going to go with one of these modern ones, but I think I'm going to go with number 1 because I really like what it's doing in terms of vibrancy. Or we can look at camera vivid, which is also nice. So if I want to see the comparison, just click on one so it's highlighted, and then just hover over the other. Okay, so this one's giving me a lot more sort of contrast, and I think I'm just going to go with that one. Okay. So now I want to make sure I'm not clipping anything. So I'm going to pull the highlights down. And I want to darken this bottom part. So I'm going to do an edge vignette. Okay, that solved it, but it's kind of gone a little too far. So I'm just going to double check here. Let's make it a little rounder. Like so. And maybe not quite so dark. The other thing I'm going to check is lens corrections. Okay, so I'm going to turn on both chromatic aberration and profile corrections. And what happens, this is Olympus file, I believe. I think. Yes, this is an Olympus file. So it's the profile for the lens is automatically applied if you check this off. Okay, so it knows that the lens profile, what lens is being used and what camera. But I feel like there's some vignetting going on the edges here. So I'm just going to turn this off for a moment and check lens corrections here because I want, oops, not distortion. Although that could be interesting for an abstract. Let me just get rid of, see how that is getting rid of the darkness on the edges. Like so. Then I'm going to go back here and darken a little bit. Still making the corners darker than I would like. So I'll come back to that. Let's darken overall. Still not crazy about that. Okay, let's go with color priority. Sorry, I'm coughing a little bit because I've got just a little beginning of a cold. So I'm hoping to keep it off. I am going to do a vignette this way. So I'm going to use a mask and do a radial gradient. And what I want to do is I want to darken everything except sort of this upper area. So I'm going to invert it and then just darken like so. So I want to bring the contrast down a little bit. And this is where we can start playing with lowering the haze, lowering the clarity, making some more blurs, right? So it's that branch at the bottom here, darkening a little bit more. I don't want to lose that bright color though, okay? Now I want to see what happens if I choose to add another mask and select the sky. Remember, this is not the actual sky. This is a reflection. But look what happened. Okay, so it did indeed select the sky in the reflection. So I'm going to darken it even more. We can even play around with a sky replacement if we take it to Luminar, right? All right, now we're getting somewhere. So there's sort of the before and after. I'm punching up the color a little bit, right? We can use the HSL panel to darken the blues, brighten the greens, and then we can actually shift the hues. So if we want to start doing some really funky things, right, we can start making purple sky or funky colors. We can make the trees more orangey blue. Now you have sort of almost like, you know, what's called a teal and blue, like a LUT, like you would imagine doing a LUT, which we can do in Lightroom as in Luminar, applying a LUT. Okay, if you have a LUT or a lookup table and you want to apply it in Lightroom, it's where the color profiles are going, the camera profiles. That's where you would install them. Okay, so I'm not going to actually do that here because I want to show you another way of shifting the colors. Okay, so let's do one more mask. I still want to darken this bottom corner, so I'm going to just do a linear gradient and darken a little bit over here. I'm literally just adding blue. Okay, can you see that? So I'm just making some color appear where there was not color before. Right, so I've added blue using this, but I could also add blue this way. Okay, so we could literally start to put some color in. Oh, sorry, I missed these. Did I hit mute in time? I didn't want to sneeze on you guys. Hopefully I didn't. Okay, so we could add some color this way. Maybe let's go a little more greenish with it. Right, so we could get funky this way. And then if I want to add another color, I could just add another one. Or let's do a radial one. Say I want to do a color over here. Okay, again, we can just pick a color. If I want it more blue or I want it more red. Okay, so see how you can make some really, really funky things here. Just gonna feather it a bit more and keep it on that area. So now we're starting to get some abstraction happening. Okay, can you see that? So there's multiple different ways that you can use the tools in Lightroom. What have we done so far? Camera profiles, right? Using the masking tools and just applying some color, and using the HSL tools. Okay. Another major way that you can edit an image and make abstract, especially like this, is the tone curve. Okay. I'm going to go back up here and do the basic, and I'm going to lower the texture. Right. So now look what happens. See, we've got full blur. Right. I'm going to lower the texture. I don't want to go too far with clarity because it ends up sort of making a mush. Or I want to go higher with clarity and lower with texture. I find that tends to work really well. And if you lower dehaze, it lightens the whole thing and you lose sort of that punchy color. So you have to make sure you add some black back in. Okay. We can do the shift double click if I want black and white, but there's no rules here. Remember, when you're doing abstract, there's absolutely no rules whatsoever. So anything goes, really. Okay, so now we've started blurred it out a bit more. Okay, so there's before and after. And if I want to keep this part sharp, I could just mask it off a little bit. I could just say, okay, I'm going to do a linear gradient just down in the corner here. And remember, anything you do in this presence panel, if I've done it globally as minus and then I do it as a local adjustment plus, it's basically going to cancel it out what I did on the other one. Okay, so if I put a little bit of texture back, right, it will keep that tree in the corner looking like a tree. Just, I like that sort of hint of reality there to just mess with people, right? Okay, so now let's go to the tone curve, right? Might do some more pink up in here. I see I feel like some color might work up in here too. Okay, so when you go to the tone curve, and we have a full video on how to use tone curve. It's based on Luminar AI, but the tone curve works exactly the same in whatever program you're using. Okay, so if you could please share a link to our video on curves, please, Rob. So the flipped version is interesting on its own, yes. And that was what I saw immediately when I saw this image. Originally, I was like, okay, I'm going to flip this and make an abstract with it. Okay, funky colors, right? Awesome. Okay, now with the tone curve, when you do any adjustments on the curve, usually it just applies to the overall image. It doesn't shift the colors, okay? I'm just going to undo that. When you start going into these color curves, now you can see there's red and cyan. So these are opposite colors on the color wheel. So red and cyan. If I push the curve this way, we get red. If I push it this way, we get cyan. So it's kind of a teal blue. But if I shift things around, I can make the highlights teal blue and the shadows red, or vice versa. Teal shadows, red highlights. Okay. Now keep in mind, the steeper you make this S curve, the more contrast you're going to get as well. Okay. So if I don't want as much contrast, I'll just keep it a little closer to center. Okay. And you can do this with any of them, or you can just bring the center point in. Okay. So if I want green highlights or pink highlights, right? Now we've kind of got crazy. So remember I said I wanted some pink over there? We could definitely add some pink like that, like that. And then green shadows. Or we don't want green shadows, we want yellow shadows. So let's go this way. Or we want blue shadows. Oops. I'm going to grab right on this corner one here. There we go. So now we want blue shadows. Keep the highlights neutral or yellow. So you can really get crazy with your colors this way. Okay. Now, what if this is not blurred enough, right? If I'm using the basic panel, I've got texture almost all the way down. I can bring the clarity down, but of course, then we lose that contrast, right? What happens if I apply another linear mask, and I'm going to come over top of this little tree in the corner again, and then I'm going to invert it. So basically it's everything except the tree in the corner. And now I can go even further with the texture. Okay. I can increase the contrast. And guess what we have now? Now there's curves. So what we didn't have before as part of the adjustments that you could do locally, now we have curves. Okay. So you can do just a regular curve to add more contrast, or let's say I want some yellow in the highlights. I'm still not happy with that. I like the pink and the green myself. Kind of making some apocalyptic sort of stuff here. See, so it's not affecting this area. And it allows me to go further with the texture. So if I want to keep blurring, I could just do -100 and apply it multiple times, just simply by duplicating this mask. Right? So if I duplicate this mask, it duplicates the blur and all the effects that have been applied to it. Right? So now we're getting something really wacky. Okay? Now, if we decide, okay, that's great, but now it's gone too far and I don't want this little thing in the corner, we could either include it in the masks or just crop it out at the end of the day. Right? I kind of want less of this white sky. So now we've got something completely abstract. Okay? So can you see the steps that I used to create that? We can use the basic panel to lower the texture and blur it. We can use the color, the camera profiles here. We can use a tone curve, and we can use the HSL. And I haven't even touched color grading. Okay, so that's another tool that you can use in Lightroom to affect the colors, right? We talked about this in another video. If you could share Lightroom color grading video, please, Rob. So I could take this one and say, well, I would like my midtones to be more orange. Okay, so I can take my midtones, more orange. And I want my shadows more blue. I'm not happy with the green. Okay, like so. So there's multiple tools right inside of Lightroom. You don't have to go to Photoshop, and we've done a pretty good job of abstracting this, right? The color grading in Lightroom video, please, Rob. I know you're multitasking. Now, if you want to make another version of this, that's the benefit of Lightroom, is we can just make a virtual copy. So right click and create a virtual copy. And then we can do something completely different, right? So we can reset it or start with something different. Maybe this time I might want to do black and white, actually. Okay, so if I want black and white, let's just do that. Now keep in mind, all of the stuff that I applied that had color in it in the masks, even though the image is black and white, the color is still there, okay? So if you don't want those, you have to remove all these ones with the masks. So I could just delete all the masks. Where are we? There we go. We're going to delete all the masks. And you'll notice that there is still some color, and that's from the color grading. Okay, so if you want to get rid of that, you have to reset that as well. Now we're back to black and white. And we've still got some color in the tone curve. So see how many places we actually applied color. Now it's back to black and white. Okay. So now you could go a completely different direction. And remember, when you're applying the local adjustments, you can add color with any of them. So if I want to just do a radial gradient and just have, actually, let's just do the sky. Let's just select the sky. And let's just say I want some blue sky. Oops, let's make it a little bluer so you can see it. And then just darken it. Okay, so now we've got blue sky. Let's select the opposite. Now we've got the trees. Now I'm just going to select something green. So now we literally have a duotone with blue and green, but none of the original color. Okay? Interesting, right? I'd love to hear from you already. How many of you have gotten some ideas of how you can use these tools in Lightroom? Because we're going to do the next one in Luminar. Have you gotten some ideas based on which tool did I show you that you've never used before or never thought about using in this way? Okay? Tell me in the chat. And if you're watching this video later, tell me in the comment area below. What tools in Lightroom can you use to abstract your image that you haven't tried before? Okay, so that one was kind of fun to play with, right? Let's take a Lightroom. Let's take a Luminar one. Now we've got several of Neil's here, and he said he works in either. So I'm going to pop these over to Luminar. So let me just grab these ones of Neil's. Just kind of minimizing the images we see. All right, so which one do we want to work with here, right? So this is the original, and we've got some already sort of blurred images from the zoom that was done in camera. So I kind of like this one. This one or this one. This one's got still some trees left, so it's got a hint of what is actually there. This one is a little bit more abstract to begin with. So let's start with this one. And let's see what everybody is saying here. So Lee learned about the curves tool. Cool. Vivian hadn't used color grading before. And Kelly says, haven't realized there was a curves tool added to masking. Yes, absolutely. That was with one of the most recent updates. Marguerite says, I like the idea of playing with the tone curve to change the colors. Awesome. Never been great with color grading and see the opportunities. Great. All right, so you've already got some ideas, okay? And all of those things that I did in Lightroom, you could do in Luminar as well. There's a curves tool. There's a color tool, which has the HSL. There's toning, which is the same as color grading. And we also have LUT, which will apply all kinds of color into Luminar. But there's also some additional tools that Luminar has that Lightroom doesn't have. So let's take a look. Okay, so we're going to start with this one. Now we can actually run it through HDR merge as a single image if we want to see what that does. So whenever I'm abstracting, I like to just kind of go, what if we do this? Okay, so I'm just going to put that in there and just run it through and see what comes out. It's going to flatten it, so we might get some more detail in the dark areas and the sky to work with. But let's see what it does. This one of the flowers kind of neat too. Okay, so I'm just going to drag this one back into the same folder. Let me just favorite it. So I'm going to drag this back in here. And now let's see. So this is the one I believe it just created. Yeah. Okay, so there's the original. And that's what came out of the HDR merge. Is it better? I don't know. Kind of like the original. But it was fun to try. You'll notice that we get more of this sort of streaking down here. So that's kind of interesting. Now, if you want to go crazy, you can actually run this image through HDR again and see what happens. But let's go from here. So I am taking the one that I dropped into HDR. Now I know that I want to add some color and probably enhance the blur. So I'm going to go into color harmony, and that is the tool that we don't have in Lightroom. This one is a tool that I absolutely love. That's why it's up in my favorites. Okay. In the color contrast section right here. So when you drag the amount up, wherever your slider is down the bottom here allows you to control how it affects the image. Okay, so if I'm on orange, it brightens and adds contrast to orange. If I'm on blue, it does the opposite. Darkens orange, brightens and add contrast to blue. Okay, so you see how we can really bring the orange out here, actually somewhere in there. So see what's happening there? So we could go like wild with the color. Or let's see what happens if we go somewhere over here. That orange is kind of nice, right? It's really bringing that orange out. Then we can also say, well, the cool colors, I'd like them to be cooler. So the purple gets more blue this way, or gets more purple, pink this way. So I like more blue. Let's go with the blue and orange. So they're really, really opposite colors, okay? Same with the orange. We can make it warmer or more intense orange, or go the opposite way, which kind of neutralizes it and is defeating the purpose. So if anything, I'm just going to go ever so slightly higher. Now, normally I would say, don't go too crazy with the color. But when you're dealing with an abstract, the sky's the limit. So I'm actually going to dial this back a little bit. Let's go something like that. Okay, so see what's happening there? We got some really neat color coming out. Okay. Next, I'm going to do some blur. So there's a number of different ways we can do that, right? We can do that with minus structure. So we can just do like that. But now we've kind of lost all the effect. So structure is not my favorite way to blur. I'm going to undo that. You can do minus details using the details tool, right? So we could go minus on the large and the medium details and increase the small details. Right? So look at what that does. If I zoom in a little bit, right, it's enhancing the streaks while blurring some of the other bits. Okay? So that's kind of interesting. Let's see what happens if we go the opposite way. So if we sharpen the large and the medium details and blur the small details. Okay, so now we've got something different yet again. Right? So you could really sort of play around with these things here and decide, okay, which way do we want to go? I kind of like the idea of sharpening the small details a little bit. So I'm going to go somewhere in there. Like so. Okay, so we blurred bits and sharpened bits. So there's a before and after so far. All right, let's see. Another way to blur is glow or mystical. Okay, so glow, if we actually use the glow option here, it's going to make the lightest areas glow. So it's kind of glowing the orange. I like that. Okay, so we could make that brighter or darker. I don't know if I want to add contrast or not. So I'm just sort of playing around with it. Okay. It's kind of taking the color away, so not that crazy about it. My favorite is usually Orton effect, and it almost always adds brightness. So I usually have to dial it down to about minus 80 or so. And I don't necessarily want to add so much contrast. But let's see what it's doing. Okay. Making some wild colors. So I'm not going to go quite as far, maybe to about 44, 45. Okay. I do like glow. Okay. Mystical is another one of my favorites. And we're adding sort of glow on top of glow on top of glow, right? Now we've got lots of saturation going on. Maybe we don't want quite so much. Or maybe we want more. We could go neon. In this case, we could go neon, right? Because when you're doing abstract, the sky's the limit. Literally. Okay. So softness. Ooh, I like that. Let's go all the way here. So shadows, we could darken or brighten. Smoothness. This one brings out more of the streaks. I like the streaky idea. Or we could mask it into just certain areas. We haven't masked any of this because it's looking quite nice. Right? So let's see where we're at. So that's the original, and that's where we're at. Now, let's copy these settings. Actually, let's go back to the library. So now I'm going to do copy the adjustments, and let's paste it onto this one. So this was the original before I ran it through HDR merge. And let's see what we get. It might take a minute for it to apply. Wowzers. Okay, so it's definitely abstract, but we can go back and dial it down if we want, right? So we can dial down any of these at any point. That one was okay. I didn't use structure, so I can delete it. That one looks okay. Oops. I'm going to bring that one down just a little bit. And this one I'm going to bring up a little bit. Okay, so this is the one that went too far on this one. So let's dial that back a little bit. Like so. So now when we go back here, we've kind of got something similar. There's the original, and there's the one that I ran through HDR. Which one do you like? Okay. And we could keep going. The other tool that I haven't used on here is the mood tool, which is where you'll find the LUTs, right? And now we have previews available for them. Okay, so the one that I had in mind, usually what I do is I bring the amount up higher so that we can really see what it's doing before I start to hover over. Okay, so I have in mind sort of one of these teal and orange ones. So let's take a look. Anything grab? Ooh, that's kind of neat. Number 4 was kind of neat. Now we're getting some really funky things, right? Ooh, that one brings out some nice blue in the sky. So you get to decide. I kind of like this Kharkiv one or this one. That one's going a little too crazy for me. So I'm going to go with that one. See that? Really intense blue. So there's before and after. The other thing that we could add to this one is sun rays, right? So it's kind of got some neat stuff happening here, but we could literally add a sun in the middle here where this zoom is happening. Okay, so we could go with that. I want to make it warmer, so it's got more yellow. Right? Do we want more sun or less sun? Glow radius, glow amount, right? And then we can literally just sort of decide how many rays we want, maybe less, maybe more. The overall look. I kind of like the idea of the yellow rays only coming down and not over the blue sky. So that was kind of an idea that I just had. literally just now. And of course, we can affect the overall look like so. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to mask it so it's only on the bottom half like this. So it matches up with the yellow. Okay, so it's only coming down. And if we want to have some going up, then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take a really big brush and just do like one pass kind of thing, like so. So it just comes up a little bit. Okay. Now I can decide the intensity, or maybe not quite so long. Like so. How do we like the sun rays? Maybe even more. Maybe we need more. So when you do more, they get sort of thinner. I'm not crazy about the thin ones. I like these ones. There we go. I could literally play with this tool all day and just keep doing random until I get something that I like, right? So I just kind of play around. It's kind of this balance. Oh, I like that. All right, let's go with something like that. Make them a little bit shorter. Okay, and now you can see what it's doing. So we've kind of got like this alternate universe going on now. Okay. So before and after. All right, let's see what everybody is thinking. Neil, the wackier, the better. Well, is that wacky enough for you there, Neil? No. Consider myself a photojournalist. I've only used the color tools for more realistic photos. I'm branching. We're working on trees. Yes, we were working on trees. Branch out. Awesome. Let's see. So the one that you were talking about, Danelle, is the color harmony tool, and that's exactly what it does. It's adjusting the opposite colors. So in this case, orange and blue at the same time. It's darkening one, right? So if I go back in here, now it's going to be really intense. If I apply it again, okay, so let me just drag it up quite, there's someone there, okay? So if I'm in this orange range down here, yellow to orange, it is brightening and enhancing orange colors, increasing the contrast, and darkening opposite, which is blue. If we go this way, it's doing the opposite. So see how it's adding contrast and brightening the blue while at the same time darkening the orange. So let me actually show you if I want to apply this one to brighten the sky a little bit, we can just do a mask and apply this one to the top. Okay, so now see how that's brought the blue out at the top like that. So any of the tools can be masked at any time. Right? Abstract is fun. Okay, so the key here was it was taken as an abstract with the long exposure and the zoom during the exposure, and then we just went crazy with it. A bird with wings overlaid across it. Okay, well, we can do that because I have a bird, actually. Let me just see. I have a bird. Where's my bird? So I have some objects that I cut out. Let me just go back here. I'm just going to load an image because I've got some cut out objects. There we are. I have a duck. How about the duck? He doesn't really work. How about the seagull? Seagull works, right? Okay, let's do the seagull. I mean, I could add the duck, but I think it will be silly. And where did the duck go? Seagull should be right here. it's taking a moment to think about it. So once the seagull is in there, I can add him. Let's see. Love the sun rays, right? So I kind of had that idea with this one as well. The red clouds at the top are your bird. Yeah, you can kind of see them, right? Seeing patterns in the clouds. I agree, Anne. Neo does have some great color tools. I really love them. And making the sun rays realistic, in this case, we don't have to worry about it, right? So this is the fun of making abstracts, right? If you want to do a zoomed image like this, there should be an article on our website, Rob, in terms of, there's one called making a zoom. I think it's just a zoom, how to do a zoom blur, something like that. If you could please find that. And apparently I can't get the comment to come off. My computer is slowing itself down. Okay. All right. So now we have a bird, and he is definitely lowered opacity. Do we want to make him a little smaller? Put him in the middle here. We could also rotate him to match the angle. And we could change the blend mode. Okay. So if I make it normal, you'll see just the bird because I've cut him out. Okay. So he's got he's a transparent PNG. So I cut the background out and made this image like this. Okay. Or we could do something where we blend him. So soft light or hard light actually is kind of cool. Okay. So if we do hard light, ooh, I kind of like that. How about that? All right. So there we go. Good question, Marguerite. The original object for this blur was, there's Neil Scene. Okay, so that's his original image. And then he started doing the blurs. Okay, so if I go back to Lightroom, we can see all of them here. Okay, so there's his series of images that he created with different exposures. Okay, so you have to zoom your lens during the exposure to create a zoom like that. Okay, and one thing you want to make note of is focus, zoom in tight first, focus on something, or if you want nothing in focus, that's fine too, and then zoom out. Okay, so he's also got the horizon at a tilt, so it's created even more of an abstract, right? So that's a great question. All right. We did a good job with that. Okay, let's go back to Lightroom. And see, the other thing is that these other ones here were submitted by, let me see. This is another one of Vivian's, and we've got, actually all of these are Vivian's, these textured ones here, and the flowers are Holly's, right? So with something like this, it's already pretty abstract because the flower is got such a minute depth of field, right? But what if we put this through that same color harmony? Let me see if there's any green in here, right? I want to pick up some of the opposite colors. So see how I'm getting a little bit more contrast then, right? So we're getting a little bit more contrast, like so. It's a little bit orange, so I'm going to do that. And I'm going to go play with the color tool because I think I can change the difference between the yellow and the green here. And so I'm going to darken the green. There's a little bit of green in the center of the flower. You see that? Darken the green, brighten the yellow. So see how there's orange in here? That's orange, right? That's yellow. Ooh, that's kind of cool if we go that way. Look at that. Now we're getting some abstract stuff, right? Now we're getting abstract. I would probably use the erase tool and get rid of some of these spots just because they kind of don't go with with the scene. I know what they are. They're part of the end of the flower, the stamen. All right, so let's see if it picks them up under dust spot removal. I got some of them. So I would just go and remove the rest of them like so. And unfortunately, my monitor is dirty, so I can't tell. Oops. I can't tell what's dirty. Yeah, so there's lots of stuff on here. You would just come in and remove some of these spots. But if we go do some blurs, that might solve it. Okay, so I got rid of the biggest ones. Another one that might work on here actually is high key or dramatic. So high key tends to lower the saturation, which we don't necessarily want to do. Okay, so high key, you can add some contrast this way. Okay, so it softens the color a little bit. Let's try that. Okay. And the dramatic, which is under creative. Okay. Local contrast. See, there's those spots again. So there's definitely some spots going on. And we want to keep the saturation. So I'm just playing around with contrast. Maybe an edge vignette. Oh yeah, that's better. Right, so I'm gonna make it a little rounder. So you can see where the edge vignette is. Like so. That looks good. I'm going to off-center it a bit because I want this part to be darkened a little bit more than this upper part. Okay, that looks better. So now we're getting some textures out, right? So where you go with it is up to you. Okay? So that gives you some ideas. And then, of course, we could start doing some glow and do all kinds of funky things, right? Again, Orton effect always adds brightness. I find it does add saturation as well. Or we could just do glow. And in this case, it's not doing that much. Okay, so play around with that one a little bit. There's kind of some interesting things you could do there. Something else I didn't do with this one, which we could just do real quickly as well with Luminar. Again, you don't have this ability in Lightroom. So if you want to do this, you have to go to Photoshop, and that is to duplicate the layer and change the blend mode. Okay, so I'm duplicating the layer, and then the blend mode, change it to multiply. And what it does is it adds the contrast. Okay, so then you can just dial the opacity down. So if you want to intensify everything even more, use this multiply blend mode. Okay, but you can also see what these other modes do. Okay, so there's color burn, we can lighten. This one adds contrast. Okay, so these are not bad as well if you want even more, and so on. Okay, so play around with these blend modes and duplicate layers. Okay. I'm just going to delete that layer. Okay, now we're going to go back. All right, Lightroom. So this one that you sent, Marguerite, is not really an abstract. I know you had mentioned in your form when you sent it in as to the question about, well, what is an abstract? How do you make an abstract? So I hope you're getting some ideas as to how you can photograph something in an abstract way. Okay, so something that is out of focus, you can blur during the exposure, right? Now we can make this into an abstract. I could take this into Photoshop and do the fancy flower, twist or something like that. But starting from here to make an abstract, I'd have to do a lot more work than, for example, the ones that I just did, right? The ones that already have some abstraction going on in camera. So I'm actually going to save this one. I'm going to put it, let's see, we don't have a still life. So I'm just going to make a new folder, and at some point we'll have still life. All right, so I'm going to save that one. Okay. Let's do Danelle's. And then I'm going to show you a few of my images. Okay, so we've covered lots of these here. So let's start with the same thing again. So I'm going to brighten it a little bit before we go into the profiles, just so that we can see the colors a little better. Okay, so I just brought up the exposure. Okay, so now we can look at camera profiles. Of course, landscape gives you more yellows, greens, and blues. In this case, might be a good starting point. Okay. So let's see what other options we have. Now we're back to modern. Again, that brings out the yellow. That's more brown. I really want to bring these colors out. I don't mind what we have. Okay, now keep in mind that if you choose one of these other than the camera profile, you can actually dial it up or down. So you can make it more intense even than what is on the original. Okay, so now we've just got green. I kind of like what we had. Did we look at the artistic ones? Oh, now we've got all kinds of colors, right? So these are doing something similar to a LUT, right? If you're doing that in Luminar, you would be doing a LUT. So I'm actually just going to go with the landscape one because I like the colors. Actually, I like this one better. I like the portrait. There's more blue, right? So I'm going to go with the portrait one and intensify the colors a bit more. So we're going to do shift, double click. Now look what happened. Okay, so as soon as we set the black point, everything went really dark, right? But the colors get more intense. And I'm going to clip a little bit up here. Like so. Let's add a vignette. And then we can go and play with HSO. So this is going to be one where I'm going to adjust the luminance and increase the yellow. Oops, I'm on hue. See, make sure you're on the right tab. Increase the yellow and darken the green. Oh, maybe not. Let's darken the blue though, because I want to intensify these blues. And where does orange fall? There's a little bit of orange in there. Right? Let's give the yellow more color. Let's give the aqua, the green. We could probably just intensify all the color. So see what's happening there? We're getting lots more color. And then if we want to shift the colors around, that's kind of neat. I like those colors. Now this thing up in the top corner is kind of not working for me. These are too bright, right, compared to the rest. So I can either come back here and lower this and increase this, or we can do some editing, right? So what I'm going to do is, watch this carefully. I'm going to use the spot healing tool. My cat's going crazy. Set to content aware fill. I'm going to get a really big brush, okay? And I'm going to paint over this whole thing. Actually, I'm not going to use content aware fill. You'll see in a second here. So it's analyzing it, and it's going to try and fill it in, okay? Now, it didn't do a great job. Cats are going crazy over it. Rob, I might need you to come and see what Munch is chasing. She might have a mouse. Then I'm just going to lower the opacity, okay? Hitting refresh will change up where it's drawing from, right? But if I turn this off, oops, it's still analyzing. If I turn this off and on once it's done analyzing, right, can you see what it's doing? See that? So that's the original. It's kind of doing something weird. So I'm going to choose the place I want to select from, right? The other option is I could just go to healing and choose the spot. Okay, so I'm going to choose a source that has some blue colors. There we go. Right, so 0 opacity. Let's feather it a little bit more. 0 opacity. We've got the bright thing in the corner. And then as I drag it up, it starts to intensify the blue. Great. And I'm just going to do the same thing. Make my brush a little smaller over this one. I painted crooked. Let me do that again. So I'm just going to paint straight down. Okay, that looks pretty good. So see what that's doing? It's just adjusting those colors a little bit. Now this one, I'm going to move over here a little bit more so I get more blue. Something like that. There we go. I have no idea what that is. It's trying to tell me. The kitty is inside, and I don't know if there's a mouse, but yes, I meant a real mouse. We get mice in the house. We have an old house. So I meant a real mouse. She has eaten them. No, I'm not pulling your leg. Okay, so now I'm going to lower the texture again. So clarity makes makes kind of mush. See that? So I don't usually lower the clarity, but texture, right? If we want more lines and we want them to be more intense, we increase the texture. So we could go two different ways here. This actually looks kind of neat. So increase clarity, increased dehaze. Look what happened there. So we could go pastel or intense. Intensivo, Spanish. Okay. Let's see the before and after. So there's the before, a little dark. Look at the color. Okay, cool. Now let's say I want some more blue streaks. There's missing some blue streaks over here. Well, we could go back to our spot healing tool. And I could use the cloning tool. And I'm just going to copy these. Now what's going to happen is it sets that as the destination. Okay, so I'm going to switch them around. So I'm going to move the destination over here. Then I'm going to move the source over top the blue. I could have done it the other way around too. I could have just painted over here. Okay? Now you can see it's sort of blending in. Okay, now if I do full clone at 100%, it's not going to blend very well. So I use healing instead of clone. Look at that. See, now we just got a little bit of blue coming in over there. All right, like so. And then if I want to do the same thing here, I could say, well, I want some blue here. This time I'll do it the right way. So that's the destination. Now we just change the source. When you're going off the end like this, you have to make sure that it matches up well. So I'm kind of getting these lines to match up. Let's lower that a bit. This is literally just playing around, right? And so there's before and after. So again, this would actually make a really cool background now. So some of these abstracts that we're making, think about saving them as overlays or backgrounds for your Luminar Neo images that you can use as a background layer or an overlay, right? Or they could just stand on their own. Now, if we want to put a bird or a duck or a cow, I'm not cutting out any cows today. Okay. So yeah, that was that dehaze slider that did that demo. So try playing with that. All right, what am I missing here besides the fact that the cats are catching mice here? Rob says he wants to do a poll. Do you go out and photograph for the themed live streams that we're doing, or do you find photos that you already have? Okay, so Rob's going to put the poll up for you. So we're going to be announcing the next 2 topics. We actually have images. We're not going to be here next week. We're going to be scouting a location for a workshop that we're hoping to plan for next year. So there's no live next week. The next one will be in 2 weeks. So that'll be the first Wednesday in August. And I already have a topic and theme for that one. And I've got lots of images. But our next 2 are going to be gardens. So start thinking about garden and landscape. Okay, so garden tends to be, more prim and pruned and things, or it could be vegetables. You decide. What does garden mean to you? And also landscape. So landscape leaves it wide open, right? Ooh, Anne has a great idea. Danelle, take this. I'm going to export this and send it to you. But take this and make a puzzle. That would make a great puzzle because, damn, that would be hard. Holy cow. That would be hard. So they're answering the comments and they're answering the poll in the chat, but I think there should be a poll or something that popped up, you guys. Yes, greenhouse counts as a garden. Absolutely. And where's Sheila? You're the gardener. Kelly, gardens, my fave. Awesome. So you've got lots to photograph. So what's the result of the poll here? Yes, absolutely. All right. So now I want to show you some things that I did with my abstracts. And we haven't done this one yet, Anne. But I hope you got some ideas. So we could literally shift these colors around. So I'm going to do this one real quick here. I'm just going to straighten it and crop it. Oops. I'm going to crop. So I'm just dealing with the sign, kind of like so. I just want the sign. I don't want all this other stuff, right? The sign is the neat part here. Okay, so we're going to go with the sign. And I could straighten it if I want to straighten it and so on. We could use the transform. Actually, let's do transform. So transform, we could set like so. So I'm just squaring it up on the edges here like this. And then that way and that way. Okay, so now we got square. Okay. Oops. Well, that's a little cropped in too much. We had just purple. Okay, let me just come into the edge. We're missing the white over there, but that's fine. Okay, so now if we go to we can either go to curves, and this is a great one to actually practice with because you can literally see, how it affects all the colors, right? So it doesn't just affect red and cyan in this case, right? It affects all the colors. So when we shift things, now we've got cyan on the white, right? And red shadows. See that? So it changes the colors. Green, right? And if we go to HSL under the hue, let's use the targeted tool, right? We can shift. So keep in mind, look, I'm on the purple, but there's obviously blue in there as well. So it's affecting the blue, right? Let's go this way. And then we could go purple this way. And then green, we could go this way. And yellow going orange and red also going orange. Okay, so you can totally shift the look of your image. So look at the difference, right? Colors completely changed. And this is what you can use to change like the color of somebody's shirt, that kind of thing. So using the color tool in Luminar allows you to mask it. And this is one of my huge pet peeves of Lightroom is that the sliders here under hue, saturation, and lightness do not apply under any of the masking tools. So I'm glad that the curves is now there, but you can't do HSL. Okay, so if you want to mask your HSL, go to Luminar. All right, so then I want to show you a couple more things for today. And I feel an article coming on. I feel an article coming on about abstract. What do you guys think? Would you like to know about how to shoot and process for abstract photos? Now, before I show you the giveaway one, this is the image that I used for the featured image for this week's live, right? Do you want to know how I created that and what the original looks like? Okay, so if I come in here, let me just do a before. Oops. I actually have to go to the develop. Okay, so that's the original image. That's the original image. So that's how it was photographed. Can you tell what was done there? I'll give you a hint. I'll put the camera information up on the screen. You should be able to. There we go. Okay, so can you see the camera information there up here? Right, so it was a 2.5 second exposure. So what did I do? Any guesses? If you're watching the replay of this video, put your guess as to how I created this image in the camera first. Okay, oh, I'm going to show you the magic, Dano. I'm going to show you the magic. Okay, so when we look at the before, right, that's what it looked like out of the camera. That's not what the subject looked like, right? So Anne has hit the nail on the head, right? Anne and Danelle. So absolutely, I don't know why my comments are not showing. There we go. Absolutely, it was a zoom, okay? In this case, no, it was not light painting, Holly, right? The light painting was done by the zooming itself, okay? I did not rotate, Kelly. I just zoomed, okay? Yes, small aperture. So the small aperture is because I needed to get a longer exposure and there was a lot of light. So the ISO is 100. F16 allowed me to get the longer exposure. Okay, so I had the smaller aperture to get the longer exposure. So let me show you what I actually was photographing, because this was taken in the lobby of a hotel in San Francisco. So that's what I photographed. Okay, so they had these things hanging down from the ceiling, these little lights. And then can you see over here, there's this funky sculpture kind of thing. So what I did was I went around the other side. So I had the sculpture in the foreground and these sparkly lights in the background. And then I zoomed, right? This was a 4-second exposure, but I didn't zoom, okay? So let me just show you the variations here. Sorry, let me go back here. Okay, so this one, I was playing around with how fast I zoomed, the exposure. Here you can see 1 second at f9, ISO 200, right? Whether I zoomed in or out, right? This one is 1.6 seconds. But the difference is how fast I zoomed. Did I stop at any point? Did I start zoomed in and zoom out? Okay. And they all look slightly different. Okay. There you can see, again, without zooming. There's a tiny bit of zoom there, but not much. Again, tiny bit of zoom, but not much. This one, I was playing with the colors as well. And so you can see the amount of zoom or how fast I zoom. This one looks like hyperdrive to me, like hyperspace. Star Wars, Star Trek, jump to hyperspace. Okay, there you can kind of see the sculpture a little bit better, right? So it's over here and the lights were over here. So I was getting the zoom and it wasn't sort of even. So then I was just moving around. There I applied the funky color, more zoom, okay, funky color. And this was the one, this is ultimately was my favorite, right? So I've processed this one multiple different ways at different times, right? So I've shifted the colors, right? You can see a different version there. Right? So I really had fun photographing this subject because it was so interesting. Right? So you can see this one is not as zoomed, right? So you can see sort of the lights starting to zoom and the pipes on this sculpture thing here. Okay. You get the idea. Okay. So I started, but look at how many images I took, experimenting with the times and so on. Questions. Did I play with the white balance when taking the images? No, I kind of wanted it orange, so I kept it with daylight, I believe. I could probably tell you what I shot. Let's have a look. Let me go to one that's not processed. Okay, so if I go to as shot, it was at 4950, so roughly daylight. Okay, roughly daylight. But no, I didn't play around with them too much. And yes, I was definitely working with a tripod. Okay, if I was not working with a tripod, what happens is you start to get zigzaggy lines. So I'll show you one that I zoomed where I didn't have a tripod. See what happens? Okay, so this was the same type of thing I attempted. This was in New York. So I zoomed, but because I didn't have a tripod, I was kind of jiggly. And again, it made an abstract. So it's different. It's not right or wrong. It's just different, right? Let's see. Okay. I've never zoomed while pressing the shutter, perhaps a demo of the actual movement. Well, let me see if I can do that. I can try. I don't have a camera here. So literally, you should be holding your, if you're on a tripod, you're not holding the camera anyways, right? So you've got a tripod, your lens is here, you have your remote if you're on a tripod. So you press the button and then you literally just rotate the zoom lens. That's it, right? So which way you go, do you do increments? Do you stop? Do you do quickly and then wait? Or do you wait a little bit and then do it slow, right? So there's so many different ways to zoom. And that's why I was getting the variations in those images, because some of them I let it sit for, a count of one or something. The longer you have to play with, so if you have a 4-second exposure, the more you can play around with variations, because you can do, say, 1001 and then slowly for the rest. Or you could do just slow for the entire duration, or you could do slow and then 1 second at the end, or you could do 1001, 1002, 1003, 1004, and then you'll get during your zoom. Okay. But check that article, Holly, because I talk about that in the article. I have a wild mind and eye. Thanks, Sheila. You can use bulb mode. Bulb mode is really only needed when you're over the amount that your camera can count for you. So in my case, my camera will actually count up to 60 seconds on using the timer. And if you want to go longer than that, then you need bulb. Okay, so if your camera goes up to 30 seconds, you don't really need bulb until you go past that, right? But you definitely need a remote then, right? I do generally take my tripod wherever I go, Lee. In the one in San Francisco, I actually didn't have my tripod, but another guy did, because I had this idea, so I borrowed his tripod. And then he kind of copied me. Oops. Let's see. No, I don't. I generally don't use bulb mode. Even for night painting, if the exposure is 30 seconds, I will use 30-second exposure. If I'm doing longer than that, then bulb. Yeah. No, you don't hold it one at a time, Holly. So press it, do a zoom, and then you kind of want to reset, right? So like I said, if you want one thing to be in focus, if you want the thing that's zoomed in to be in focus, like a sign or something, start zoomed in and then zoom out. Okay, so start at the longest end of your lens. So if you're going for 24 to 70, for example, start at 70, start zoomed in, focus there on manual focus. Then when you zoom out, right, things will be in focus. You can also play with the focus too, right? Is it frozen now, Rob, or is it okay? Something happened. Yeah. Thanks, Gord. The beautiful thing about abstract, different and original, more artistic, less documentary. Exactly. You need a zoom lens, obviously. So the longer the range of the zoom, like for my Fuji, I have an 18 to 135, the bigger the streaks. Okay, so the more you zoom, the bigger the streaks. So you just have to experiment. Just get out there and start playing with it. But you definitely need a zoom that goes, if you have 24 to 70, that will work. But if you have 24 to 200, you're going to get bigger streaks. Okay. All right, so let me show you how I created that color because everybody's asking. And two things I want Rob to actually talk about in the chat because he went to his first powwow on Friday. So that was kind of exciting. And we're going for all you can eat ribs tonight. So we've got a date with some ribs. Okay. I'm going to check my private chat, Rob. Okay. All right. So now let me go back to these ones where I did this funky color. So before I show you in the develop module, what do you think I used? Any guesses? Any guesses as to which tool, based on what I did with the other one, what did I do here? Let me get in here. Any guesses? Kelly's played with zooming on flowers, zoom out a bit, and no focus, then lay a focus flower over top. Oh, there you go. Yep. Well, if you take two the same, Kelly, try this. Take two the same, one in focus, one out of focus without zooming. So they're exactly the same shot, but one's in focus, one is out of focus, and lay them over top as layers. If you put the blurry one on top and change the blend mode on the blurry one, you're basically doing Orton effect. That is literally how Orton effect used to be done with slide film. Okay. So yes, Rob's first powwow was a big one. There was probably, I don't know, 1,000 people there, a couple thousand people there. But it's quite big. Yep. Yes, and he has a new hat. So toque is a beanie if you're American. Right? And Holly's referring to we actually did a photo shoot with a wrestler, female wrestler. And no, I've not learned any moves, but we're going to be going to one of her matches. I'll show you the images as well if we have a second here. So I've got some guesses here. Color toning, color harmony, color harmony. Well, I only did it in Lightroom. So besides the fact that there's a typo there, yes, I used curves. Okay. So if I go in here, you can see what I did to the curve. Okay. So there's what I did to the blue curve, green curve. It's those two. Okay. So if I turn off curves, that's what it looked like. Pretty boring. Okay. So I went crazy. When you start to do stuff like that, that's where you start to get like this posterized kind of look. Okay. And then if I go look at this one, okay, now you can see what I've done with curves here. So I adjusted the red. Again, we've got some funky twists going on, green and blue. Okay. How did I decide on that? Just played around. Okay. And let me see where the one is that I actually did for the featured image. Okay. So there's the same idea. Okay. So I'm going to duplicate this one with a virtual copy. My brain wasn't working for a second. And I'm going to reset curves. So if I turn the curves off, okay, so that's kind of what the original looks like. So I'm going to reset curves. And I'm actually going to start with one of these other ones. Okay, so I'm going to copy the settings from here. So I'm going to copy this. And I'm going to apply it to this virtual copy that I just made. So I'm going to start from here. Okay. Now, you can see that I've already got some arches in these. Again, my brain's not working. Curves, okay? And that's just punching up the contrast, okay? So those are normal curves. This is normal curves. All I've done was punched up the contrast in these two curves, okay? If I reset it, it could probably do the same thing, just using a basic curve like this, okay? But now, if we want to get funky with the color, let's get funky with it, okay? We can start adding points, right? If I want the whites to be more cyan, I got to come down this side. Or I want red. Ooh, let's do that. That's kind of funky, right? Now, when you pull down here, it brings the whole line. So if you put another point, kind of balance it out, okay? Then we can start going funky like this. when you start switching things around and start doing posterizations, okay? See how funky that is? Completely different, right? Now I want some magenta. Again, let's do some weird color twists. Okay, we're adding some green into the shadows. This one's not doing a whole lot, but you can see, let's see, it's doing anything. So you could go really crazy. Look at it. So now we have Christmas. So this one I'm not crazy about. So I'm just gonna input this one back to normal. Oh, no, I didn't want to do that. Just wanted to get rid of these ones. Okay, so it's kind of Christmassy, so maybe a little bit less green. Okay, and it's got a lot of contrast, so I'm gonna undo some of this contrast. And we got too much red. But again, is there too much red? Is there such thing as too much red? See how it goes funky when you start intersecting or crossing your lines over? Right? Totally different. Right? And we can still play with the hue and saturation, right? So if I don't like the red, let's make it more orange. Let's make the yellow more green, and so on, right? So beginning and end. So the sky literally is the limit here, right? Look at the histogram. It's crazy, right? It's absolutely crazy. Absolutely crazy. Even as I change the exposure, everything changes. See that? Wacky. Explosion. So I think that's probably good enough for tonight. And I hope I've given you some ideas as to how you can get super creative. A few other quick ideas in terms of taking abstracts. I will do an article on that, but here's some ideas, right? Just literally shoot things out of focus. That's the same sign, okay? Water, blurring some water, right? You can make abstracts out of these. I could do some funky colors with this and pull this through the curves tool, okay? There's another zoom. Here's some examples of using the in-camera movement besides a zoom, okay? So that's the original subject. And here's literally a long exposure. It's a 2.5 second exposure. And I just moved the camera around like that. That's it, okay? That's all I did. This one here, same thing. So I'm just moving the camera around. Yeah, I'm too small then, Rob. I don't want, or the picture's too small. There, how's that? Okay, so this one, I'm literally just moving the camera like this by hand. And the next one, same thing. I was just playing around with different movements. This one was on the tripod, so I swiveled the tripod head this way and then up and down. Okay, so that's how Danelle likely made hers, was a long exposure on some trees or things, up and down. Other long exposures, right? Carousel. Anything with lights makes great abstract, right? So I was playing around with long exposures on this carousel, and you could see I tilted and got some really funky things. Close-ups make great abstracts. Reflections make great abstracts, right? I added some bokeh. Right? This one here, I may play around with layering it, and I'll see what I can come up with and put this in the article. I did some long exposures of the people going through these gates in Japan. I also tried some zooming. So I played around with lots of different things, including completely out of focus stuff. And you could stack these as layers later on. Okay, so I may play with these and see what I can come up with in terms of abstractions. This one I added some bokeh, right? Same thing here. Added some bokeh. Close-ups. Back to the powwow, okay? So I love to go to powwows and photograph powwows. If you're going to photograph an event like this, please share the link, Rob, for photographing cultural events with sensitivity. Do make sure that you know the protocol and the rules around whether or not you can photograph, and that any time if somebody does not want to be photographed, let me just get on the screen here. At any time, if somebody does not want to be photographed, by all means, do not photograph them, okay? Just out of respect. But close-ups and things like this of the regalia, details. I love the patterns and the colors, right? So these could make interesting abstracts as well, right? I was playing around with motion of the dancers and letting the movement of the regalia and the ribbons and so on become abstract, right? Close-up abstractions. So I can do all kinds of neat things with these, right? I think that gives you, oops, my keyboard is literally worn out. I have to get a new keyboard. So does that give you some idea on where you can go with your abstracts, right? Bamboo, top to bottom. Yes, absolutely. That's another good one, right? Thanks, Vivian. I'm glad you picked up some new things, and I'd love for you all to go out and photograph, because when I do the post on an abstract, I'm going to ask for some images. So I want to see your abstract images on the website, or you could share them in the Facebook group. So I'm going to sign out. Thanks, everybody. Thanks, everybody. Sheila says it was brilliant. So catch us in 2 weeks' time from tonight. For we're going to be doing animals. So I've already got lots of those. I saved those over from last time, but get out there photographing your gardens and your landscape images. So thanks, everybody. And we are definitely going to call it a night and eat some ribs. So take care.